The ship's engines died with a sound like thunder. Dr. Sarah Chen grabbed her seat as the research vessel spun through space. Red lights flashed everywhere. The computer voice kept saying, "Hull breach. Emergency landing protocols activated." Sarah looked out the window and saw a green planet getting bigger and bigger. Trees covered most of the land. Rivers ran like silver lines between mountains. It looked peaceful. She hoped it would stay that way. The ship hit the ground hard. Sarah's head banged against the wall. Everything went black. When Sarah woke up, something was pulling her arm. She opened her eyes and saw a thin, gray creature with large black eyes. It had 4 arms and skin that looked like smooth stone. The creature made soft clicking sounds and pointed toward some trees. "Wait," Sarah said. She tried to stand up but felt dizzy. "Who are you?" The creature stopped pulling and stared at her. Its eyes got very wide. It made more clicking sounds, then said in perfect English, "You speak, but you are so loud. The hunters will hear you." "Hunters?" Sarah looked around. She was still near her crashed ship. Pieces of metal were scattered everywhere. "What hunters?" The creature grabbed her arm again. "Come quickly. We must hide before they smell the fire from your sky vessel." Sarah followed the creature into the forest. 2 more gray beings waited there. They all had the same thin bodies and large eyes. One of them carried a small device that made the air shimmer around them. "I am Scholar Zethkar," the first creature said quietly. "These are my research partners. We study the old ruins in this area. We saw your vessel fall from the sky." "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen," she whispered back. "Thank you for helping me." "You must stay quiet," Zethkar said. "The great hunters patrol this area. They have very good hearing and can smell heat from far away." As they walked deeper into the forest, Sarah noticed something strange. The 3 aliens moved without making any sound. Their feet barely touched the ground. The device one of them carried made their whole group look blurry, like looking through water. "What kind of hunters are you talking about?" Sarah asked. Zethkar stopped walking. He looked scared. "You have never seen a great hunter. They are larger than your crashed vessel. They have teeth like spears and claws that can cut through stone. They hunt in groups and they are very smart." Sarah frowned. "If they're so dangerous, why don't you have weapons to fight them?" All 3 aliens stared at her like she had said something crazy. "Fight them?" Zethkar's voice was barely a whisper. "No one fights the great hunters. We hide. We have always hidden. It is the only way to survive." They kept walking until they reached what looked like a normal hill, but Zethkar pressed his hand against a rock and part of the hill opened up. Inside was a tunnel that led down into the earth. "Our emergency shelter," Zethkar explained. "We will be safe here until the hunters move to another area." The tunnel led to a small room filled with strange machines. Blue lights glowed from the walls. Everything was very clean and organized. Sarah had never seen technology like this before. "This is amazing," she said, looking at the glowing walls. "How does it work?" "Sound dampeners and heat shields," Zethkar said proudly. "The hunters cannot detect us here. This shelter has protected my people for 300 years. Sarah sat down on a chair that formed itself from the floor. "Your people have been hiding for 300 years? "Much longer than that," said one of the other aliens. "Our whole civilization is built underground. We have great cities beneath the surface. We only come up to study things when we are sure the hunters are far away." "But you have such advanced technology," Sarah said. "Surely you could build weapons or defenses." Zethkar looked confused. "Why would we build weapons? Violence only creates more violence. The great hunters have ruled this world since before our species learned to think. We survive by not disturbing the natural order." Sarah was quiet for a moment. On Earth, humans had faced dangerous predators too. But instead of hiding, they had learned to fight back. They made spears and arrows. They used fire to scare away dangerous animals. They built walls to protect their homes. A loud roar echoed through the forest above them. The 3 aliens immediately became very still. Even their breathing seemed to stop. "Great hunter," Zethkar whispered. "It must have smelled the metal from your ship." More roars answered the first one. Sarah counted at least 5 different voices. "A full pack," another alien said. "They will search this area for days." Sarah stood up and walked toward the tunnel entrance. "I need to see them." "No." Zethkar grabbed her arm. "You cannot go up there. They will kill you instantly." "I just want to look," Sarah said. "I won't go far." Against Zethkar's protest, Sarah climbed back up the tunnel. She stopped just inside the hidden entrance and peered out through a small gap. What she saw made her breath catch. The great hunters were enormous. Each one was as big as an elephant but built like a lion. They had 6 legs and moved with smooth, deadly grace. Their heads were covered in bony ridges and their mouths showed rows of teeth as long as Sarah's arm. 5 of them moved through the forest, searching. They communicated with low growls and seemed to work together like a military unit. One of them sniffed the air near Sarah's crashed ship and roared to the others. Sarah watched them for several minutes. They were intelligent and dangerous, but they were still animals. They had the same basic behaviors as predators on Earth. They relied on sight, smell, and hearing. They worked as a team but followed a pack leader. Most importantly, they could be hurt. Sarah saw scars on several of the creatures, old wounds that had healed. That meant something on this planet was capable of fighting back and surviving. The largest hunter, clearly the pack leader, raised its head and roared. The sound was so loud that rocks fell from the trees. Then all 5 creatures moved away from the crash site, heading deeper into the forest. Sarah climbed back down to the shelter. The 3 aliens were huddled together, still looking terrified. "They are gone," she said. "For now," Zethkar replied. "But they will return. They always return. We must wait here for at least 3 days to be sure." Sarah picked up a piece of broken metal from her equipment pack. It was about 2 feet long and had a sharp edge where it had torn apart in the crash. "What are you doing?" Zethkar asked. Sarah tested the weight of the metal piece in her hand. It would make a good weapon if she could attach it to a longer handle. "I'm thinking," she said. "About what?" Sarah looked at the 3 advanced aliens who had spent their entire civilization hiding in holes in the ground. About what happens when something that is always hidden decides to stop running. Outside the shelter, another roar echoed through the forest. But this time Sarah didn't feel afraid. She felt something the Vorthaki had never experienced when they heard that sound. She felt angry. Sarah waited until the 3rd day. The great hunters had not returned to the area around her crashed ship. Zethkar said it was safe to leave the shelter, but he still wanted to move very carefully. "We will take you to the nearest transport station," he said. "From there, we can bring you to one of our cities. You will be safe underground." Sarah picked up the sharp piece of metal she had been studying. "Actually, I want to go back to my ship first." "That is not wise," Zethkar said. "The hunters may return at any time. Then we'll be ready for them." Sarah walked out of the shelter and headed toward the crash site. The 3 aliens followed her, but they kept looking around nervously. Their camouflage device made them all look blurry and hard to see. When they reached the wrecked ship, Sarah began collecting pieces of metal and wire. She also found her emergency kit, which had survived the crash. "What are you doing?" Zethkar asked. "Making tools," Sarah said. She used a piece of wire to tie the sharp metal to a long piece of the ship's frame. Now she had a spear almost 6 feet long. The aliens watched in confusion as Sarah made 2 more spears from other pieces of wreckage. She also gathered some of the ship's emergency flares and a small cutting torch that still worked. "These are weapons," one of the aliens said. He sounded scared. "Yes," Sarah replied. "Tools for fighting. But why would you make such things?" "We have technology to hide from the hunters. We do not need to fight them." Sarah tested the balance of her spear. "Because hiding isn't living. It's just surviving." A low growl came from the forest behind them. All 3 aliens immediately crouched down and activated their camouflage. But Sarah stood up straight and turned toward the sound. 3 great hunters emerged from the trees. They were smaller than the ones from before, but still enormous. Each one was easily twice Sarah's height. They spread out as they approached, clearly planning to surround their prey. "Run," Zethkar whispered. "We must run to the shelter." "No," Sarah said. She gripped her spear and took a step forward. "Watch and learn." The lead hunter roared and charged toward her. Sarah waited until it was almost on top of her. Then she rolled to the side and drove her spear into the creature's front leg. The metal went deep into the muscle. The hunter screamed and stumbled. It had never felt pain like this before. None of these creatures had ever been deliberately hurt by another thinking being. The other 2 hunters stopped their attack. They stared at their wounded packmate, then at Sarah. This was completely outside their experience. Sarah pulled her spear free and faced the wounded hunter. She shouted at it and waved the bloody weapon. The creature backed away, confusion clear in its eyes. "Impossible," whispered one of the aliens. Sarah activated one of her emergency flares. It burned with a bright red flame and made a loud hissing sound. She threw it at the feet of the second hunter. The creature had never seen fire before. It jumped back and roared in alarm. The third hunter tried to circle around behind Sarah, but she was ready. She threw her second spear and hit it in the shoulder. The creature yelped and ran back into the forest. The wounded pack leader looked at Sarah one more time, then turned and limped away. The second hunter followed, still looking back at the strange burning stick on the ground. Sarah picked up her remaining spear and turned to face the three aliens. They were staring at her with their mouths open. "That was," Sethkar said slowly, "the most amazing thing I have ever seen." "It was just basic tactics," Sarah replied. "On my world, we learned long ago that most predators will retreat if you hurt them enough. They don't want to risk serious injury unless they're very hungry. But our legends say the great hunters cannot be harmed," said one of the other. "Aliens, your legends are wrong." Sarah wiped the blood off her spear. "These creatures have scars. That means something on this planet has fought them before. You just chose not to." Over the next few hours, Sarah explained basic hunting concepts to the three aliens. She showed them how to make simple weapons and traps. She taught them about using fire to scare away predators. The aliens listened carefully but seemed shocked by everything she said. "Your species has always done these things?" Sethkar asked. "For hundreds of thousands of years," Sarah said. "Before we had advanced technology, we survived by being smarter than the things that wanted to eat us." "But violence creates more violence," Sethkar said. "Our teachers have always told us this." "Sometimes," Sarah agreed. "But sometimes violence ends violence. Those hunters will think twice before attacking anything in this area again." That evening, Sarah built a campfire near her crashed ship. The aliens were terrified of the open flame, but Sarah explained how it would keep dangerous animals away during the night. "The hunters hunt by smell and heat," she said, "but fire confuses their senses. They can't tell the difference between a natural fire and a living creature." As they sat around the fire, Sethkar asked Sarah many questions about human society. He wanted to know how her people had developed weapons while still building advanced technology. "We learned to fight when we needed to fight," Sarah explained. "But we also learned when not to fight. The key is having the choice." "Choice," Sethkar repeated. "We have never had that choice." "You do now," Sarah said. The next morning, Sarah and the three aliens traveled to the nearest Vorthaki transport station. It was hidden inside what looked like a natural cave, but inside was a vehicle that moved through underground tunnels. The journey to the city took 2 hours. Sarah spent the time teaching the aliens more about basic tool-making and tactics. By the time they arrived, word of their encounter with the great hunters had already spread. The city of Kethmori was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It was built entirely underground but felt open and spacious. Glowing walls provided light that looked like natural sunlight. Gardens grew in chambers carved from solid rock. Advanced technology was everywhere, but it all seemed designed to work in harmony with the natural world. Thousands of Vorthaki lived here, but they all moved quietly and carefully. Even in their own safe city, they seemed afraid to make noise or draw attention to themselves. A group of older Vorthaki met them at the transport station. These were the city's leaders and scholars. They examined Sarah with great interest but also obvious worry. "You are the being who fought the great hunters," said one of them, an elderly female named Elder Vashtor. "I defended myself," Sarah corrected. "There's a difference, is there?" Elder Vashtor asked. "Our people have lived in peace for thousands of years by avoiding conflict. You bring weapons and violence to our world." "I bring choice," Sarah replied. "The choice to fight back when something wants to hurt you." Over the next few days, word of Sarah's actions spread throughout the city. Young Vorthaki began asking her questions about human weapons and tactics. Some of the older citizens worried that these ideas would destroy their peaceful way of life. Sarah found herself at the center of a debate that would change the Vorthaki forever. On one side were those who wanted to learn human methods. On the other side were those who believed hiding was the only safe way to live. But deep in the city's research labs, a small group of young Vorthaki had already begun working on something that would settle the debate once and for all. They were building weapons. The argument in the council chamber had been going on for 3 hours. Elder Vashator stood at one end of the room, her forearms spread wide as she spoke to the gathered leaders. "This human brings chaos to our ordered world," she said. "For 10,000 years we have lived in harmony with the great hunters. We do not disturb them, and they do not seek us out. This balance has kept our people safe. At the other end of the room, Scholar Zethkar held one of the metal spears Sarah had made. But Elder, we are not truly living. We hide in holes like frightened animals. We have the most advanced technology on this world, but we are afraid to use it on the surface. Sarah sat quietly in a chair near the center of the chamber. The Vorthaki leaders had been debating her presence for days. Some wanted her to teach their people human fighting methods. Others wanted her to leave the planet before she could influence more young Vorthaki. The great hunters are part of the natural order, Elder Vashtor continued. They control the populations of other species. They maintain the balance that allows all life to flourish. If we fight them, we disrupt everything. A younger council member named Kirthana stood up. But what if the balance is already broken? What if we have been hiding so long that we have forgotten how to truly live? This caused an uproar in the chamber. Several older council members began speaking at once. Their voices echoed off the stone walls until Elder Vashator called for silence. The human has been here for only 10 days, she said. Already our young people speak of violence and weapons. This is not our way. Sarah finally stood up. The chamber became quiet as all eyes turned to her. May I speak? She asked. Elder Vashtor nodded reluctantly. On my world we have a saying, Sarah began. The best defense is a good offense. But I think you've misunderstood what I'm trying to teach. She walked to the center of the room, where everyone could see her clearly. I'm not suggesting you go out and hunt down every great hunter on the planet. I'm suggesting you give yourselves the choice to fight back when you need to. Right now you have no choice at all. Choice leads to conflict, Elder Vashator said. Conflict leads to suffering. Sometimes, Sarah agreed. But the lack of choice also leads to suffering. How many of your people have died because they couldn't defend themselves? How many discoveries have you missed because you were too afraid to explore the surface? Scholar Zethkar stepped forward. The human is right, Elder. Yesterday a group of young researchers asked me why we don't study the ruins on the eastern continent. I had to tell them it was too dangerous because of the great hunters. But what if it didn't have to be dangerous? Before Elder Vashator could respond, an alarm began sounding throughout the city. Red lights flashed on the chamber walls. A young Vorthaki burst through the chamber doors. Great hunters at the north entrance, he shouted. A full pack. They're trying to break through the outer defenses. The council members looked at each other in panic. This had never happened before. The great hunters had never found one of their cities. How many? Elder Vashtor demanded. At least 8, the messenger replied. Maybe more. They seemed to be following a scent trail. Sarah realized what had happened. They followed my scent from the crash site. The camouflage technology hides you from their normal senses, but I wasn't hidden when I traveled here. Elder Vashator turned to her with anger in her large eyes. You have doomed us all. No, Sarah said firmly. I've given you an opportunity. Another alarm began sounding. More red lights flashed. South entrance compromised, came a voice over the city's communication system. Hunters are inside the outer tunnels. Panic spread through the chamber. The council members began talking about evacuation procedures and emergency protocols. But Sarah was thinking about something else entirely. How many people live in this city? She asked Zethkar. 50,000, he replied. And how many entrances are there? 12 main tunnels plus dozens of emergency exits. Sarah nodded. The hunters are smart, but they're still pack animals. They're trying to flush you out by blocking your escape routes. If you run, they'll pick you off one by one. What else can we do? Kirthana asked. We have no weapons. Yes, you do, Sarah said. You have the most advanced technology I've ever seen. You just need to use it differently. She turned to address the entire council. I need volunteers. 50 people who are willing to try something that has never been done before. What are you suggesting? Elder Vashator demanded. I'm suggesting we stop running and start fighting back. Over the next hour, as the great hunters continued their assault on the city's outer defenses, Sarah worked with a group of young Vorthaki to develop new tactics. They took their advanced holographic projectors and modified them to create false images of fleeing prey. They took their sound-dampening technology and reversed it to create noisemakers that would confuse the hunter's hearing. Most importantly, they took their energy tools, devices normally used for cutting stone and shaping metal, and turned them into weapons. Kirthana proved to have a natural talent for tactics. She quickly understood Sarah's explanations about flanking maneuvers and coordinated attacks. Other young Vorthaki volunteered to help, despite the protests of their elders. "This is madness," Elder Vashator said as she watched them prepare. "You will all be killed." "Maybe," Sarah replied as she tested an energy cutter that had been modified into a spear-like weapon. "But your people will die anyway if those hunters break through your inner defenses. At least this way you go down fighting." The first test came at the north entrance. 3 great hunters had broken through the outer barriers and were advancing through the main tunnel. The traditional response would have been to seal the tunnel and evacuate everyone in that section of the city. Instead, Sarah led her volunteer team toward the threat. The tunnel was wide enough for the hunters to move freely, but Sarah had prepared for this. She had Kirthana's team set up holographic projectors that created the illusion of multiple escape routes. When the hunters saw what looked like fleeing Vorthaki, they split up to chase different groups. That's when Sarah sprang her trap. Energy nets, normally used for construction work, dropped from the tunnel ceiling. The lead hunter became tangled and couldn't move. Sarah and 2 other volunteers attacked it with their modified energy weapons. The creature had never experienced organized resistance before. It roared in pain and confusion as the energy weapons burned through its thick hide. The other 2 hunters tried to help their packmate, but Kirthana's team was ready. They used portable force field generators to create barriers that channeled the creatures into kill zones. Within minutes, all 3 great hunters were dead. The victory was so shocking that news of it spread through the city faster than the emergency alarms. For the first time in their recorded history, the Vorthaki had killed great hunters in direct combat. But the battle was far from over. The main pack was still attacking the south entrance, and they had learned from the fate of their scouts. They were being more careful now, more coordinated. Sarah looked at her team of volunteers. They were shaking with fear and adrenaline, but there was something new in their eyes, something their species had never felt before. They felt powerful. "Ready for round 2?" Sarah asked. Kirthana gripped her energy weapon tighter. "What do we do next?" Sarah smiled. "Now we take the fight to them." As they moved toward the south entrance, more Vorthaki joined their group. Word of their success had inspired others to volunteer. Even some of the older citizens picked up weapons and followed them into battle. The great hunters were about to learn something new about the species they had. Terrorized for millennia, the prey was learning to hunt back. The south entrance battle changed everything. Sarah led her growing team of volunteers through the tunnel system toward the main hunter pack. But these hunters were different from the ones they had faced before. They had learned from the death screams of their scouts. They were being careful. 5 hunters holding the main junction, Kirthana reported as she returned from scouting ahead. "They're not advancing further into the tunnel. They're waiting for us to come to them." Sarah studied the tunnel map on her portable display. The junction was a large circular chamber where 6 tunnels met. It was the perfect place for the hunters to make their stand. "Smart," she said. "They can cover all the approaches and retreat if things go badly." "So what do we do?" asked Morvex, a young engineer who had joined their group. "We can't attack them directly in that chamber. They'll tear us apart." Sarah looked at the 50 Vorthaki who had volunteered to fight. 3 days ago, these people had been hiding in underground laboratories and libraries. Now they carried energy weapons and wore improvised armor made from mining equipment. "We don't attack them," Sarah said. "We make them attack us," she explained her plan. It was risky and required perfect timing, but it played to the Vorthaki's greatest strength, their technology. The team split into 3 groups. Kirthana took one group through the upper maintenance tunnels. Morvex led another through the service corridors. Sarah kept the largest group with her in the main tunnel. Each group carried portable holographic generators, sound makers, and what Sarah called campfires, thermal generators that would create heat signatures the hunters could detect. The plan was simple. Create the appearance of 3 separate groups of fleeing Vorthaki. Make the hunters think they had cornered easy prey, then spring the trap when the creatures split up to hunt. Sarah's group reached the tunnel that led to the main junction. She could hear the hunters ahead, low growls and the sound of claws scraping against stone. They were getting impatient. "Activate the campfires," Sarah whispered into her communicator. All through the tunnel system, thermal generators began creating heat signatures. To the hunters, it would look like dozens of warm bodies moving through the passages. The response was immediate. Roars echoed through the tunnels as the pack split up to chase what they thought were fleeing prey. 2 hunters heading toward Kirthana's position, Sarah said into her communicator. 1 moving toward Morvex, 2 coming toward us. We're ready, came Kirthana's voice. The first hunter to reach Sarah's position was the largest she had ever seen. It barely fit in the tunnel and had scars covering its entire body. This was an old, experienced predator that had survived many battles, but it had never faced organized resistance with advanced technology. As the creature charged down the tunnel, Sarah activated the first trap. Force field generators created an invisible barrier across the tunnel. The hunter slammed into it at full speed and crashed to the ground, stunned. Before it could recover, energy nets dropped from the ceiling. The creature struggled and roared, but the nets were designed to hold mining equipment that weighed several tons. The second hunter learned from its packmate's mistake. It approached more carefully, testing the air for danger, but Sarah was ready for this too. Holographic projectors created the illusion of solid walls where the tunnel actually continued. The hunter thought it was trapped in a dead end and began backing away. That's when Sarah's team attacked from concealment. Energy weapons fired from hidden positions in the tunnel walls. The hunter spun around, trying to find its attackers, but the Vorthaki had learned to use their environment. They fired, moved, and fired again from new positions. Within minutes, both hunters in Sarah's tunnel were dead. Kirthana, report, Sarah said into her communicator. Both hunters down, came the reply. These energy weapons cut right through their armor. It's like they have no defense against them. Morvex, hunter eliminated. But I have a problem. More hunters are coming from outside the city. I count at least 6, maybe 8. Sarah felt her heart sink. They had prepared for the pack that was already inside the city. They hadn't expected reinforcements. Fall back to defensive positions, she ordered. We need to regroup. But as Sarah's team moved back through the tunnels, they found something unexpected. More Vorthaki were joining them. Word of their victories had spread throughout the city, and citizens who had never held a weapon in their lives were volunteering to fight. Elder Vashtor appeared in one of the main tunnels, carrying an energy cutter that had been modified into a weapon. Elder? Sarah said in surprise. I thought you opposed this. I opposed unnecessary violence, the older Vorthaki replied. But when violence becomes necessary, it is better to be prepared for it. By the time they reached the city's main defensive chamber, Sarah's force had grown to over 200 volunteers. Engineers had worked through the night to modify more tools into weapons. The medical staff had prepared treatment areas for wounded fighters. Most importantly, the city's leaders had made a decision that would change their civilization forever. We are no longer hiding, Elder Vashator announced to the assembled defenders. If these hunters want to enter our city, they will have to fight for every tunnel. The second wave of hunters attacked at dawn. 8 massive creatures coordinated their assault on multiple entrances simultaneously. But they found something they had never encountered before: organized resistance. The Vorthaki had spent the night preparing. Every tunnel was trapped. Every chamber had defensive positions. Energy barriers channeled the hunters into kill zones where concentrated weapon fire could bring them down. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 14 great hunters lay dead in the tunnels beneath Kethmori. The Vorthaki had lost 11 defenders, but they had won something more valuable than a single battle. They had won their freedom. In the weeks that followed, word of the victory spread to other Vorthaki cities. For the first time in their recorded history, they began to emerge from their underground homes. Surface settlements were established, protected by perimeter defenses and armed patrols. Sarah helped design new weapons that combined human tactics with Vorthaki technology. Energy spears that could penetrate hunter armor from 100 meters away. Portable force field generators that could create defensive walls anywhere. Most importantly, communication networks that allowed surface teams to coordinate their actions. But the greatest change was in the Vorthaki themselves. They began to walk differently, with confidence instead of fear. They spoke louder. They looked at the sky instead of constantly watching for danger. Kirthana had become their first great hunter, a Vorthaki warrior trained to hunt the creatures that had once terrorized them. She led patrols that kept the trade routes safe and helped establish new settlements on the surface. Morvex had developed new technologies that combined the best of both approaches. Advanced sensors that could detect hunters from kilometers away, but also simple traps and barriers that would work even if the power failed. 3 months after the Battle of Kethamori, Sarah received a signal from space. A human rescue ship had detected her emergency beacon and was on its way to the planet. She could go home. But as she stood on the surface of Vorthak Prime, watching Vorthaki children play in the sunlight while their parents worked in gardens that had never existed before, Sarah realized something important. She was already home. The question was whether she was ready to help the Vorthaki take their new confidence to the stars. 5 years later, Captain Rodriguez of the UES Horizon stared at her display screen in confusion. The planet below looked nothing like the reports from Dr. Chen's original survey. "Are you sure these are the right coordinates?" she asked her navigation officer. "Confirmed, Captain. This is Vorthak Prime, where Dr. Chen's ship crashed 5 years ago." Rodriguez looked at the orbital images again. The planet was covered with cities that gleamed in the sunlight. Advanced spacecraft moved between orbital stations and the surface. Energy signatures indicated a thriving technological civilization, but the original report said this was a primitive world with a hiding species. Rodriguez said, "What happened here?" The answer came when a sleek alien vessel approached their ship. The communication channel opened and a familiar voice spoke in perfect English. "UES Horizon. This is Defense Coordinator Kirthana of the Vorthaki Star Guard. Dr. Chen has been expecting you. Permission to come aboard?" An hour later, Rodriguez sat in her conference room across from 3 beings she hardly recognized as the same species from the original reports. They moved with confidence and purpose. Their technology was clearly more advanced than anything humanity possessed. Most shocking of all, they carried weapons openly and seemed completely comfortable with them. "Dr. Chen sends her greetings," Kirthana said. "She is currently leading our first interstellar expedition to the Kepler system. She should return within the month." "Interstellar expedition?" Rodriguez repeated. "But 5 years ago your people lived underground and were afraid to come to the surface." The second Vorthaki, who had introduced himself as Engineer Morvex, smiled. "Much has changed since Dr. Chen taught us that hiding is not the same as living." Over the next several hours, Rodriguez learned the full story of what had happened on Vorthak Prime. The Vorthaki explained how a single human had transformed their entire civilization by teaching them concepts that seemed obvious to any human child. "She showed us how to make fire," Kirthana said. "Not the kind of fire our technology could create, but the kind that scares away predators in the dark. She taught us that sometimes the best way to avoid a fight is to make sure you can win one." "But how did you advance so quickly?" Rodriguez asked. 5 years ago you were hiding from predators. Now you have interstellar travel." Morvex activated a holographic display that showed the development of their new technologies. "We always had advanced science, but we used it only for hiding and survival. Dr. Chen taught us to use it for growth and exploration." The display showed energy weapons that combined human tactics with Vorthaki engineering. Spacecraft designed for exploration rather than escape. Cities that existed proudly on the surface instead of hiding underground. "The great hunters still exist," Kirthana explained, "but now they avoid us. We have established ourselves as the dominant species on this world through strength, not through hiding." Rodriguez was amazed by what she saw, but she was also concerned. "Weren't you worried about destroying your ecosystem? These creatures you call great hunters, they must have served some purpose in the natural balance." "They did," said the third Vorthaki, an elderly female named Elder Vashator. "And they still do. But now we manage that balance instead of simply hiding from it." The Elder activated another holographic display. It showed great hunter populations across the planet. Instead of uncontrolled predators, they were now managed like any other wildlife species. "We learned from Dr. Chen that humans on Earth faced similar challenges with dangerous predators," Elder Vashtor explained. "They did not drive them extinct. They learned to coexist through strength rather than fear." Rodriguez spent 3 days learning about the new Vorthaki civilization. She visited their surface cities, which combined advanced technology with careful environmental planning. She saw their training facilities where young Vorthaki learned both scientific research and combat tactics. Most impressive were their space installations. The Vorthaki had developed spacecraft technology that was decades ahead of human engineering. But they had combined it with human strategic thinking and tactical planning. "Where is Dr. Chen now?" Rodriguez finally asked. "Leading our first contact mission to another star system," Kirthana replied. "We detected intelligent signals from 3 different species in nearby systems. We want to offer them the same gift Dr. Chen gave us. What gift is that? Choice, Elder Vashtor said simply. The choice to be more than they are. 2 weeks later, Dr. Sarah Chen returned to Vorthak Prime. Rodriguez barely recognized her former colleague. Chen moved with the same confidence as the Vorthaki around her. She wore clothes that combined human practicality with Vorthaki technology. Most notably, she carried weapons that looked both elegant and deadly. "Sarah," Rodriguez said as they embraced, "you could have sent a signal years ago. We thought you were dead." "I was busy," Sarah replied with a smile, "building a civilization." They sat in Sarah's office in the capital city of New Kethmori. Through the windows, Rodriguez could see Vorthaki and humans working together on construction projects. Children of both species played in parks under the open sky. "The Vorthaki have adapted human concepts faster than I ever imagined," Sarah explained, "but they've also improved on them. Their technology combined with human strategic thinking has created something unprecedented. And you're helping them spread this to other worlds?" "I'm helping them offer choice to other species," Sarah corrected. "The same choice I offered them. The choice to fight back when something threatens you. The choice to explore instead of hide. The choice to grow instead of just survive." Rodriguez looked at reports from Sarah's first contact missions. 3 different alien species had already begun adapting human tactical concepts. None of them had been forced to change. They had simply been shown that change was possible. "What's next?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah activated a holographic star map. It showed dozens of star systems with confirmed intelligent life. Some were aggressive species that dominated their regions through force. Others were peaceful species that hid from threats just as the Vorthaki once had. "We're going to offer them all the same thing," Sarah said. "Fire, spears, and the knowledge that they don't have to be afraid anymore. And if they refuse, then they refuse. But at least they'll know they had a choice." Rodriguez stayed on Vorthak Prime for another month. She watched the Vorthaki prepare for their next expansion phase. They were building ships for long-range exploration and establishing diplomatic protocols for first contact situations. But what impressed her most was a simple ceremony she witnessed. On her last day, a group of young Vorthaki were graduating from their training program. They had learned advanced science, tactical thinking, and diplomatic skills. But the ceremony ended with something that would have been unthinkable 5 years earlier. Each graduate lit a torch from a central fire and swore an oath to carry that fire to other worlds. To offer light to species that lived in darkness. To teach them that they could choose to burn brightly instead of hiding in the shadows. As Rodriguez's ship prepared to leave orbit, she sent a message to Earth Command. The message was simple but would change humanity's approach to first contact forever. Species classification for Vorthak Prime updated. Previous designation primitive hiding changed to advanced allied. Recommend immediate diplomatic mission to establish formal relations. Additional note. Dr. Chen has developed new protocols for uplifting hiding species through basic human survival concepts. Request permission to establish joint human Vorthaki first contact teams. As the UES horizon jumped to hyperspace, Rodriguez looked back at Vorthak Prime one last time. The planet blazed with lights that could be seen from orbit. Cities, spacecraft, and orbital stations created a constellation of activity around what had once been a world of creatures hiding in holes. At the center of it all was a signal fire that burned continuously in the capital city. It was a reminder of what could be accomplished when someone who had always hidden decided to pick up a spear and light a campfire. The message was spreading to other worlds now. Species that had spent millennia hiding from predators were learning that they could choose to become predators themselves, not aggressive or destructive, but confident and capable of defending what they valued. Throughout the galaxy, creatures that had lived in darkness were seeing their first glimpse of fire, and they were choosing to burn brightly.